Alright guys, basically now we're going to be going over this little thought process, right? Which is again setting your conditions. What I basically mean by that is this should help you with like your biases, right? Since you guys understand like obviously your draws and liquidity, we're gonna start using yeah, we now understand where the market's gonna retrace to, which is your fair value gaps, right? And depending how we react to those fair value gaps is the draw on liquidity or the area of liquidity or just like the point of interest, right? That we're gonna target to, right? So right here, what do we see here? We see that we have buy side here and we see that we have obviously sell side here, right? Sell side here and then sell side here as well, right? And we can mark these again as our SSLs or like sell side or whatever, right? I honestly don't mark them like that no more, but we could just kind of like have that for example. We also see we had a liquidity sweep here as well, right? So price could do one or two things here, which again we could again have this liquidity sweep here and then target these highs, right? Kind of like in this example here, we saw that price actually did retrace somewhere, right? We had this liquidity sweep, but did we have the confirmation to the upside? As of right now, we don't really have that confirmation to the upside. Let's actually check. On the 1 hour, obviously we see that well we created this bearish fair value up here. We came up and what did we do? Well, kept going lower. Had this little displacement here, which is well again your buy side, not your buy side, your break of structure, right? We starting to see that okay, we were kind of like uptrending, right? We see that we swept here. Now we're having some sort of like trouble inserting that higher high once we had the sell off right here, right? When we had the sell off here, we tried coming higher, but we couldn't, right? When we actually sold off, we created a bearish fair value gap, and what do we do from here? We obviously came down lower, targeting this low here, right? But how do we know if this low right here was going to be the last low that was going to be swept to continue higher? The thing is, we don't know that, right? But what could we use on the higher time frames to be like, okay, we're going to now see some upside. We're going to use this bearish fair value gap here, the most recent one, to actually determine that, right? So let's actually kind of remove that real quick. Um, and yeah, so if we could inverse and see just like a solid inversion up here, right? And then we could see like displacement from this previous lower low here, then we could start seeing, well, again, we could catch a little sell off here back inside or wait for that sell off and then start seeing confirmation to go even higher, right? So one or two things can happen. So if we inverse that, or in baby forms, if we inverse this, we're targeting this, right? If we stay under here, then we're targeting these lows here, right? Basically kind of setting your conditions, right? And then how could we confirm that? By again watching smaller time frame things develop. So right here we did reject that. Did we target this? No, as of right now, but we're still underneath this fair value up here. But what could we kind of like go on the smaller time frames and look for? Obviously confirmation that we're going to sell off again or we're going to see continuation. The only way we're going to see an inverse of this is if we start seeing smaller time frame confluences again being created and respected, right? Only way we're going to inverse this on the higher time frame, right? But let's kind of understand here. Like what do we see here, right? So we see that we're underneath a 1 hour bearish fair value gap, right? A lot of like kind of like how do I say it, choppiness here. So let's actually kind of go on the 15 minutes to kind of clear that up. My bad if this is taking a minute. All right. So now that we kind of cleared up like the whole like little choppiness, let's now kind of like mark our 15-minute confluences right here. We have this bearish fair value up here, where if we inverse this, then we could now see displacement lower, which again, this is just again setting your conditions, right? So if we retrace into this fair value gap, right? What do we want to see? Well, again, we're inside a bearish confluence, right? Or a bearish fair value gap. We're somewhere of rejection, right? So for me to be like, okay, I want to see this higher time frame rejection area be the reason why we go down lower. I want to see these smaller confluences basically now start displacement. So I kind of want to see inversions of this inverse fair value gap, or no, an inversion of this bullish fair value gap, and then displacement within the trend, right? Kind of retest a little bit too would be also really nice, and then target what? We could target this big ass bullish fair value gap here, and then target these lows here. If we inverse this, we could target these lows here most definitely, right? But as of right now, that's kind of like the information and the context that's given to me, right? I see the first thing I noticed is that we're under a bearish fair value gap, right? What I want to see if we're underneath a bearish fair value gap is again displacement, right? We also see when we were kind of coming down, we did have like all this breaker structure here on the small time frame here. All right, we started seeing a lot of like not a lot of but like inversions as well here, and then fair value gaps being inserted, right? So we see that we created an inverse fair value gap, and we created a bearish fair value gap, right? Basically causing this move to continue lower. What could we do as of right now? Well, obviously we're still kind of basically downtrending, right? We're still coming down, coming up, coming down. This could have just been the reason why we came up. Right here, we've actually failed to take this sell side, which was kind of a little bit surprising, right? But sometimes things like this happen, right? Market's not going to move how you want it to move. It's going to move how it wants to move. We're only just going to be reacting to how these react, right? So now let's actually see how this ends up playing. We literally just get just that, right? So we saw that we got the inversion, got the change in the state, right? Here we actually wicked up to test it, right? Or no, it was actually this one. We actually came back to test this inversion fair value gap here and the change in the state. So right here, you guys got your entry here. So this is where you're gonna set your risk to reward after, right? You could add a light size, knowing that you could add more on the inversion fair value gap, right? Oh, and by the way, if you guys are also like talking about like, oh, like what about like the liquidity sweep? We actually already did have our liquidity sweep right here, right? So we had our liquidity sweep right here too, right? And now we see that this is the high that's keeping us underneath. And then from here, we kind of now start creating like our, okay, now we could catch some sell off, right? We saw that the higher time frame, we see that we have like an area rejection. How could we confirm that we're actually going to reject? By using these smaller time frame confluences, kind of like seeing them work out, right? And then target what? The lows, or target this big ass fair value gap, because this is where we're most likely going to see a bounce, right? And then after that, if we inverse that, then we're good to target these lows down here, right? So it's all just by kind of like analyzing, kind of like thinking, right, of what is going to, like what should happen to obviously see, well, these lows being taken, right? So in order for us to see these lows being taken, we must go through this bullish fair value at first. If we inverse this, then we could target these lows here. If we stay above, then we might come back to this high up here, right? So let's kind of like, I'll just kind of draw it here, right? So if we come down to this bullish fair value gap, we might actually see a reversal back up to the buy side liquidity, where we could eventually see a little sell off again, right? Possibly back down to these lows, right? Um, or whatever, right? If we inverse this, then we could see a retracement and then target these lows like again, right? So what do we want to see? Obviously, we want to see the second option first, where we inverse this and then target our take profits first, right? So let's just actually kind of like see how this plays out. Right there, we saw that damn, we fell through really hard. So we're most likely gonna inverse this 15-minute. And then from here, we start seeing our only bounces on our sell side liquidity, right? Could we go lower? As of right now, let's actually kind of see what's keeping us underneath. Nothing on the 15. Let's go down to 5. We see that we have this bearish fair value gap here that is keeping us underneath. So as long as we stay underneath this most recent bearish fair value gap that formed, we should be good to, again, close underneath these lows, right? And not cause a reversal and target this next low here, right? And if we do see, again, market's not going to be perfect again. If we do see an inversion here, then we probably could take some sort of buy side, right? Or not buy side. We could take some sort of highs above there, right? So we did respect that, right? But again, we just came down a little bit lower. Didn't really take this liquidity here, but we do see that we end up coming above here, right? Damn, this day was choppy as fuck. And we're still underneath this higher time frame fair value gap, but we're also underneath this like 15-minute fair value gap as well. That's keeping us low this entire time. Or not this 15-minute fair value gap, but we saw when we inverse this 15, right? we can now use this as like a little area of resistance, right? Because once we inverse bullish confidences, we now kind of like play the opposite side. So again, you would expect to see this as like a little like bounce to the upside, right? Let me kind of mark this like correctly. All right, we could see a little bounce to the upside, but if we see that we inversed it, now we could use this as like another form of resistance. And then obviously if you inverse it again, just don't use it, right? Because I hate using fair value gaps that get repeatedly inversed, right? It only has to inverse once, right? And I don't use double inverses. So like, let's say for example, if don't do this bullshit, right? I don't want anybody doing this, right? Right? Like no one at all has ever done this, and I've never taught anyone like this, right? Where you come into here, inverse it, and then you play the downside from here, and then you inverse it again, and now you play the upside, right? Then you inverse it again and play the down. Like don't do that shit ever, right? That is not gonna work, and that's not how you should actually use these, right? I've never seen anyone do it, but I'm scared there's gonna be that one. I think there was one person, not in my Discord, it was in somebody else's Discord, who kept using repeatedly inverse fair value gaps, and he extended this bitch all the way to like a week ago. Don't do that shit, right? You only use this once, right, and play it once, right? Obviously we haven't really had like a clear inverse back to the upside yet, or not inverse. Obviously, we inverse this and we see that we're respecting this inversion, right? Once we disrespect it, delete that bitch, right? Use something else, right? Start using other confluences, right? And I'm pretty sure we did end up taking out this low. No. Oh yeah, we did. All right, so we basically stayed underneath that 15-minute inversion, right? Which ended up being the reason why we even sold off in the first place. Because if we use our fib tool here, we can understand that this area, I'm pretty sure this 15-minute actually ended up being 1 hour. Yeah, we see that when we sold off, when we saw that rejection here, we actually created this 1 hour, which again, now we could use this as like our conditions, right? So let's use our most recent hourly, right? So on this day, if we stayed underneath here, let me just erase a lot of things. All right, now let's actually kind of like go over this again one more time, right? If we see this 1 hour basically inverse, and if we see this change in the state or market structure shift, validate, what could we do? Target the upside. And if we target the upside, well, yeah, we now look for calls, right? As of right now, we're underneath these areas, so we just look for downside, right? The only way we're going to look for downside is, again, just going on the small time frames and look for that confirmation. What is that confirmation? Well, right here, we had all of this, like, draw on liquidity here, right? Like, all this right here, like, this entire, like, liquidity here, right? We had all of this swept by this high here, right? What do we see as of right now? Well, we see that we have these little tiny inverses, right? Or not tiny inverses. Let's actually go on the 15 minutes to actually kind of like clear this shit up. Because this is honestly like, yeah, this is honestly a chop mess. If I don't really see fair value gaps being inverse or a clear direction, then I wouldn't take the trade. But as of right now, this is really looking like kind of just like downside. Obviously, there isn't like kind of like a clear fair value gap to kind of inverse. We could use 1 minute ones, but again, I really prefer using like the 5 minute, right? Right here we saw that we had an inverse fair value gap here. We came up, yeah, this is honestly like, this is, what session is this? Pretty sure this is Asian session. Wait, yeah, this would be Asian session, and the more here would be London, but London hasn't came yet. London's more here. But yeah, this is Asian session, and right here we just had like break a structure to the downside. And then obviously bearish fair value gaps and like the momentum going to the downside, targeting these lows down here, basically confirming that we rejected this higher time frame hourly, right? So then again, that's how you kind of like use and kind of like set conditions within yourself, right? So again, understand that if we react to a certain way, we're gonna target what? Liquidity, right? So if we inverse this, to the upside, we're gonna target what? Liquidity to the upside. If we somehow come into here and then reject it, we're gonna do what? Target liquidity to the downside. Don't make it as complicated, or don't make it too complicated. Literally just kind of like set those conditions and you'll be fine.